It only took one question, one unexpected push on live television, and in a split second, the tone inside the studio shifted from polite daytime conversation to something far more uncomfortable. When Amy Adams appeared on The View, no one expected tension. But when Joy Behar pressed just a little too hard, the smile faded, the air tightened, and millions watching at home realized they were witnessing something unscripted. Before we break down what really happened in that fiery on-air exchange, subscribe to Prime Talk, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The moment wasn't explosive in a tabloid sense. There was no shouting match. No one stormed off stage. What made it powerful was subtler than that. It was the visible shift in body language, the tightening of posture, the clipped tone, the kind of reaction that only happens when someone feels misrepresented or cornered in real time. Daytime television thrives on conversation. It invites celebrities into a familiar living room atmosphere, coffee mugs on the table, friendly laughter, overlapping dialogue. But it also carries a unique pressure. It's live. It's unpredictable. And when something lands wrong, there is no rewind button. Amy Adams has long maintained a reputation as one of Hollywood's most composed and thoughtful performers. With multiple Academy Award nominations and a career built on emotionally laid roles, she is rarely associated with controversy. Her interviews are typically warm, measured, and reflective. She chooses her words carefully. She smiles often. She rarely snaps. Joy Behar, on the other hand, built her career on sharp wit and pointed commentary. As one of the long-standing voices on The View, she's known for cutting through pleasantries. Her style leans direct, sometimes provocative, often humorous, but occasionally uncomfortable. When those two personalities meet on live television, the balance depends entirely on tone. That day, the interview began as expected. Promotion, career reflection, light banter. Nothing suggested that tension was building beneath the surface. The studio audience responded with polite applause. The hosts exchanged nods. Amy maintained her usual composure. But then came a shift. A question framed in casual language, yet layered with implication. It touched on perception, on narrative, on how Amy had been portrayed in certain media conversations at the time. And instead of brushing it aside, Joy followed up. And then followed up again. For a split second, Amy's expression changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was unmistakable. Her smile froze. Her shoulders squared. Her answer grew shorter. Live television has a rhythm. A flow. When that rhythm falters, everyone feels it. Hosts, guests, audience, viewers at home. The exchange became tighter. The pauses longer. And the cameras, unforgiving as always, captured every micro-expression. What made this moment different wasn't just the tension. It was the setting. The View is built around opinion, around debate, around pressing questions. But celebrity interviews operate on a delicate agreement. Promote the project, discuss the craft, avoid turning personal speculation into confrontation. When that line blurs, discomfort surfaces quickly. And this was live. No edits, no retakes, no smoothing over awkward pauses in post-production. For Amy Adams, an actress known for immersing herself into complex emotional characters, the moment seemed to strike something personal. Her response was controlled, but firmer than usual. She clarified. She corrected. She subtly pushed back against the framing of the question. Joy, seasoned and experienced, didn't retreat immediately. She leaned in, perhaps believing she was exploring a valid angle. But in doing so, the tension escalated, not outwardly, but internally. The audience grew quieter. The other co-hosts shifted in their seats. And viewers began to sense that this was no longer a routine promotional stop. What makes live television confrontations compelling isn't chaos, it's authenticity. It's when polished personas drop, even briefly. It's when someone reveals irritation they didn't plan to show. It's when professionalism meets pressure. Amy didn't raise her voice. She didn't attack. But she did something rare for her. She snapped back with unmistakable firmness. Not anger, not hostility, but clarity that signaled she would not let the narrative stand unchallenged. In that moment, the power dynamic shifted. This wasn't just a host asking questions. It was a guest defending her perspective in real time, under studio lights, with millions watching. And the question lingered. Had Joy crossed a line, or had Amy simply reached her limit? To understand why that exchange resonated beyond the studio walls, we have to look at what led up to it. The public conversations surrounding Amy at the time, the the tone of media coverage, and why that particular question carried more weight than it appeared to. Because on live television, context is everything. And what seemed like a simple question had far deeper roots than most viewers realized. In the weeks leading up to Amy Adams' appearance on The View, the atmosphere surrounding her public image was more layered than usual. She wasn't stepping onto that stage as an unknown guest or even as a neutral promotional figure. She was arriving at a moment when conversations about her career, her choices, and her positioning in Hollywood had grown more analytical. Amy Adams has built her reputation carefully over 2 decades. From breakthrough roles in films like Junebug to major performances in projects such as American Hustle and Arrival, she cultivated an image defined by discipline, depth, and quiet intensity. Critics often described her as one of the most consistently overlooked talents of her generation, a performer repeatedly nominated for major awards yet frequently leaving ceremonies without a win. That narrative, repeated across entertainment media, became part of her identity whether she embraced it or not. At the same time, daytime television operates differently from film journalism. The View is not a press junket stop. It's a forum built on opinion and debate. Since its creation by Barbara Walters, the show has thrived on asking pointed questions that move beyond rehearsed promotional soundbites. The hosts are encouraged to react, to challenge, to personalize discussions. And that environment can create friction when a guest arrives expecting a more traditional promotional interview. Joy Behar, in particular, is known for leaning into moments others might soften. Her humor can disarm, but it can also sharpen a topic unexpectedly. Over the years, she has questioned politicians, actors, and public figures with a tone that blends sarcasm and sincerity. Sometimes it lands as playful. Other times, it cuts deeper. In the days before Amy's appearance, media outlets had been revisiting the familiar conversation about her award history. Articles questioned whether she had been snubbed too many times. Commentary panels debated whether industry politics had overshadowed her performances. The narrative was framed sympathetically by some and critically by others. What does it mean to be perpetually nominated but never victorious? Does it change how an actor is perceived? Does it create a label that becomes hard to escape? Amy herself had previously addressed the topic in measured terms. She often emphasized gratitude over disappointment. She avoided language that suggested resentment. But repetition has weight. When the same storyline resurfaces year after year, it can feel reductive, especially to someone who defines their work by process rather than trophies. That context matters. The View audience includes devoted fans, casual daytime viewers, and social media commentators ready to clip and circulate moments within minutes. Any subtle shift in tone can become a headline. A raised eyebrow can become a viral GIF. For celebrities, the stakes are different than in a pre-recorded interview. There is no opportunity to call a publicist afterward and request a minor edit. As the show prepared for Amy's segment, the conversation around the table had already been energetic. Political topics earlier in the hour had sparked animated exchanges between hosts. The environment was not subdued. It was lively, reactive, fast-paced. When Amy walked out to applause, she entered that current midstream. The early portion of the interview followed expected beats. Discussion of her latest project. Reflections on character preparation. Light laughter about balancing career and family life. The co-hosts nodded and interjected with supportive remarks. Amy appeared relaxed, leaning slightly forward as she spoke, hands loosely folded, voice calm. But beneath the surface, there was an underlying theme that had not yet been addressed. Awards. Recognition. Public perception. Joy Behar has a reputation for circling back to subjects others avoid. She listens, waits, then introduces a question that reframes the conversation. That pattern had played out many times before with other guests. It often generated compelling television. It also occasionally generated tension. As Amy discussed the emotional depth required for her recent role, Joy pivoted. The shift was subtle at first, an acknowledgement of Amy's long career. A comment about critical praise. Then a question framed almost conversationally. How does it feel to consistently be in the conversation but not necessarily at the finish line? On paper, the question might seem harmless. It echoed what entertainment journalists had been asking for years. But live, tone carries weight. Emphasis carries weight. Repetition carries weight. Amy responded initially with grace. She reiterated her gratitude. She emphasized collaboration over competition. Her smile returned briefly. Then came the follow-up. Joy pressed further, suggesting that audiences often view repeated nominations without wins as a kind of narrative arc. Did it create pressure? Did it sting? Was there frustration beneath the composure? It was at this point that the mood began to tighten. Other co-hosts shifted in their seats. One attempted to interject with a lighter comment, perhaps sensing the narrowing path of the discussion. But Joy continued, clarifying her point. From a broadcasting perspective, this is where tension often begins, not with a dramatic accusation, but with persistence. A guest answers once. The host reframes. The guest answers again. The host narrows the question. For someone like Amy Adams, who rarely engages in public defensiveness, the repeated framing risked reducing a multifaceted career to a single storyline. Viewers at home might not have consciously registered the build-up, but they felt it. The pauses grew slightly longer. Amy's posture became more upright. Her responses grew more precise. There is a distinct difference between a guest choosing to elaborate and a guest feeling compelled to defend. That line is thin, and on live television, it can be crossed without anyone fully intending it. What made this exchange particularly delicate was Amy's public persona. She is not known for dramatic outbursts. She is not associated with tabloid confrontations. So when she begins to tighten her tone, even slightly, it signals that something has shifted internally. Joy, for her part, maintained her characteristic half-smile. She appeared confident that the question was fair, perhaps even necessary. The show's format encourages challenging conversations. Avoiding discomfort is not its brand. But timing is everything. The earlier political debates had already energized the room. The audience's laughter had been louder than usual. The studio felt charged. Into that atmosphere, a sensitive career narrative was introduced and pressed. And then, in a brief moment that would soon circulate across social media, Amy Adams stopped smiling altogether. The air changed. The exchange that followed would become one of those live television moments viewers replay, not because it was explosive, but because it was real. To understand why, we have to slow down and examine exactly what happened next. The moment unfolded in seconds, but it felt longer in real time. Joy Behar leaned slightly forward in her chair, her cue cards resting loosely in her hands. Her tone remained conversational, but her phrasing sharpened. She repeated the core of her question: whether consistently being nominated without winning major awards ever truly stops bothering someone, no matter how gracious they appear in interviews. There was a brief ripple of light laughter from part of the audience, the kind that follows an uncomfortable truth. It faded quickly. Amy Adams inhaled before responding. The cameras caught it. Her shoulders lifted almost imperceptibly, then settled. The easy smile she had carried through the earlier part of the segment did not return this time. She began calmly. She explained that acting, for her, has always been about collaboration and storytelling. She said recognition is appreciated, but it is not the reason she chooses roles. Her voice was even, measured, controlled. Joy nodded, but didn't move on. Instead, she reframed the question again. If awards don't matter, she asked, why do so many people keep talking about them in connection with Amy's name? Doesn't that repetition make it harder? Doesn't it follow you? The studio grew quieter. Amy's expression shifted from polite to firm. Not angry, not explosive, but grounded. She straightened in her seat, her hands now clasped together more tightly in her lap. She responded that media narratives often take on a life of their own. She emphasized that she does not wake up thinking about trophies. She spoke about the privilege of working consistently in an industry that is notoriously unstable. She made it clear that the work itself is what sustains her. Joy interrupted gently, asking whether that answer was entirely honest. That was the pivot point. The interruption was subtle, almost casual, but it landed heavily. Amy paused. The silence lasted just long enough for viewers to feel it. In live television, even 2 seconds of silence can stretch. She turned slightly toward Joy rather than addressing the panel as a whole. Her tone changed, still composed, but unmistakably sharper. She said she was being honest. There was no laugh attached. No softening at the end of the sentence. Just a direct statement. The audience remained silent. Joy, perhaps sensing the tension, attempted to clarify. She explained she wasn't accusing Amy of dishonesty, only suggesting that it's human to feel disappointment. The tone was lighter, but the follow-up kept the focus on the same theme. Amy's response came quicker this time. She acknowledged that of course disappointment exists in any career. But she added that reducing her body of work to what she hasn't won feels limiting. She emphasized that she values the roles she has played, the directors she has worked with, and the audiences who have supported her films. Her words were deliberate. She did not raise her voice. She did not attack. But she did draw a boundary. The camera cut briefly to the other co-hosts. One offered a small nod. Another glanced at her notes, perhaps preparing to pivot the topic. The tension was visible but controlled. Joy leaned back slightly, her posture shifting. The smile returned, but it was thinner now. She remarked that the conversation itself proves how invested people are in Amy's success. Amy held her gaze. She replied that investment is appreciated, but assumptions about how she feels are not always accurate. Again, no smile. The room felt suspended. From a production standpoint, this was live daytime television functioning exactly as designed, unscripted, reactive, unedited. But emotionally, it felt closer to a private disagreement made public. The exchange lasted less than 3 minutes in total. Yet within that window, the dynamic between host and guest transformed. Amy's body language told the story as much as her words. Her posture remained upright, shoulders squared. Her hands unclasped only when she gestured briefly to emphasize that her career cannot be measured solely by awards. Her eye contact with Joy was steady and unwavering. Joy, seasoned in handling tense moments, attempted to shift tone. She complimented Amy's resilience. She joked lightly about how daytime audiences root for their favorites. A few audience members laughed, cautiously. Amy offered a small, restrained smile, but it did not fully return to its earlier warmth. The co-host seated beside Joy then interjected, pivoting to Amy's current project. The shift was deliberate. The conversation moved forward. The energy slowly recalibrated. But the air never fully reset. What viewers at home witnessed was not a meltdown. It was not a scandal. It was something subtler, and arguably more compelling. It was a celebrity asserting control over her narrative in real time. In an industry where public image is carefully managed, where interviews are often filtered and refined, this moment stood out because it was unpolished. Amy Adams, known for poise, allowed a flicker of frustration to surface. Joy Behar, known for sharp commentary, encountered a boundary she did not anticipate. And because it happened live on The View, there was no opportunity to soften the edges afterward. As the segment continued, the applause cues resumed. Smiles returned in measured degrees. But the emotional imprint of those few minutes lingered. Viewers replayed it online. Clips circulated. Comment sections filled with interpretations, some defending Joy's persistence, others applauding Amy's firmness. Inside the studio, however, the moment had already passed. Or had it? Because live television does not end when the cameras cut to commercial. The energy carries into the break. The hosts exchange glances. The guest adjusts posture. Producers lean in off-camera. And sometimes, what happens immediately after can shape how the moment is remembered. What unfolded next would determine whether this exchange faded into routine daytime tension, or became something more lasting. As the segment cut to commercial, the applause sign flashed and the audience responded on cue. But the energy inside the studio didn't immediately return to its earlier rhythm. Amy Adams remained seated for a moment, posture still upright, expression composed but serious. A production assistant approached briefly off-camera. The co-hosts exchanged a few quiet words among themselves. Joy Behar adjusted her papers and took a sip from her mug, her expression neutral, professional. From a viewer's perspective at home, the break was just another transition. But in the studio, there was a subtle recalibration happening. When the show returned from commercial, the tone had shifted. The questions were lighter. The conversation moved cleanly toward Amy's current film, her creative process, and upcoming projects. The earlier thread about awards did not resurface. Amy answered thoughtfully, but more succinctly than before. Her warmth returned in flashes, especially when discussing collaborators and character preparation. Still, there was a noticeable difference from the relaxed tone at the beginning of the segment. Joy Behar, experienced in navigating live television, did not revisit the tension directly. Instead, she offered a compliment about Amy's consistency as a performer. It functioned as a soft reset, a way to restore equilibrium without acknowledging conflict outright. The interview concluded with applause and smiles. Amy stood, thanked the hosts, and exited the stage as cameras widened for the next segment. To a casual viewer, it may have seemed like a standard daytime exchange. But within hours, short clips of the moment began circulating online. Social media thrives on nuance. A pause becomes a headline. A firm tone becomes snapping. Viewers replayed the exact instant Amy said, "I am being honest." They analyzed her posture. They debated whether Joy had pushed too far or simply asked a fair question. Some praised Joy Behar for articulating what many in the entertainment press had long discussed: that repeated nominations without wins had become part of Amy Adams' public narrative. Others argued that continuing to frame her career around what she hadn't won reduced her body of work to a statistic. Entertainment commentators weighed in carefully. Most acknowledged that the exchange was tense but professional. There was no shouting, no personal insult, no dramatic walk-off. What made it compelling was restraint. In the days that followed, neither Amy Adams nor Joy Behar issued statements about the moment. There were no public clarifications, no apologies. The silence itself signaled that, from their perspectives, nothing catastrophic had occurred. Yet the clip continued to circulate. In an era where celebrity interviews are often tightly controlled and pre-packaged, audiences are drawn to moments that feel unscripted. This exchange resonated not because it was explosive, but because it revealed something human. A respected actress expressing frustration at being defined by one recurring narrative. A veteran host pressing a question she believed was valid. The long-term impact was subtle but meaningful. For Amy Adams, the moment reinforced an image of quiet strength. Viewers who admired her composure saw a new dimension, someone willing to correct a framing she felt was incomplete. It did not damage her reputation. If anything, it broadened it. She was no longer just the gracious nominee. She was someone protective of her craft and perspective. For Joy Behar, the exchange fit within a career defined by directness. Her role on The View has always involved asking uncomfortable questions. This moment became another example of the show's willingness to lean into tension rather than avoid it. More broadly, the exchange highlighted the evolving expectations of celebrity interviews. Audiences today are more aware of media framing. They recognize when a narrative is being repeated. They notice when a guest resists it. Live television magnifies those dynamics. On pre-recorded programs, pauses can be trimmed. Tone can be softened in editing. But on The View, the cameras stay rolling. The reactions remain intact. That transparency is both a strength and a risk. The reason this moment still matters is not because it altered Amy Adams' career trajectory. She continued to take on complex roles. She remained a respected presence in Hollywood. Awards conversations continued, as they inevitably do, but the exchange added context to how she responds to them. It also served as a reminder that even seasoned professionals have boundaries. A single question, repeated with slightly different phrasing, can change the atmosphere of an entire segment. A calm but firm response can recalibrate a power dynamic instantly. In the larger cultural conversation about women in entertainment, the moment carried additional weight. Female performers are often asked about validation, recognition, and perceived shortcomings in ways that male counterparts are not. Amy's response subtly challenged that framing without turning the exchange into a confrontation. The clip endures because it captures something rare: authenticity under pressure. There were no rehearsed lines, no prepared rebuttals, just a live reaction in a live setting. And that is what makes moments like this compelling years later. Not the volume of the exchange, but the honesty within it. If you found this breakdown insightful, subscribe to Prime Talk for more deep dives into the moments that redefine live television. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know which on-air exchange we should examine next.